Scott's going to pull up our presentation slides for this morning. We want to first start by thanking the World Stuttering Network and all of the visionaries and leaders of this wonderful event for giving us the opportunity to talk this morning on a global level. We're going to take a little time to talk about stuttering as verbal diversity. My name is Nina Reeves. I'm a stuttering specialist from the US. I live in Texas right now, and I have been a career-long school-based speech language pathologist and also have a private practice specializing in stuttering.
And I'm Scott Yaruss. I'm a professor at Michigan State University. I've also had a practice specializing in stuttering. I'm a board certified specialist as well. And together, Nina and I are co-owners of Stuttering Therapy Resources, which is a small publishing company that's devoted to developing materials for speech language pathologists to help them do a better job of helping people who stutter.
And for a little background, we want to talk about the phrase verbal diversity. I want to take that moment to tell the story, but before I do, I want to start by saying that the underpinnings of the concept of verbal diversity have been decades in the making. It should come as no shock to anyone here that the idea of stuttering as a valid form of communication, that it is truly okay to stutter, these are not new ideas. And there's been people talking about this for decades, even before I came along, which you can tell is a really long time ago. And I think it's important that we acknowledge those that have come before us and those voices that are joining with us now to set the stage for this type of discussion. The fun part is that verbal diversity, the phrase came to my mind early one morning while I was getting ready for the workday. And Scott and I kind of laugh about this story because, as lots of good ideas come, it's while you're getting ready for work. And by the time I got to drying my hair, I decided to fire off an early morning text to Scott with the phrase included and the pretty much always question of, is Nina crazy? And does this sound like something that is cool? And you probably aren't going to be surprised to discover that these kinds of early morning texts happen a lot, including the phrase, is Nina crazy? But what happened was we had a small discussion and decided it was something to run with. So I used it in a social media post on Stuttering Therapy Resources, and it was really well received. And then I started using the phrase in discussions in therapy with my students, and they were really getting into it. I included it in a title to an online SLP webinar, and it resonated so well that it solidified that Nina had a not so crazy idea.
So I think that means it's my turn. Yes.
Yes.
And I'll talk a little bit about what we mean by it. Now, it turns out that this should be fairly straightforward to talk about this notion of stuttering as one example of the various ways that people may talk, and to create a world and an environment of acceptance, but not acceptance in that there's something that you have to overcome in order to accept it, just acceptance in that it is just another example of the way human beings can talk. However, it turns out that it's not that easy. As we have talked about this in particular with speech language pathologists and researchers in the United States and around the world, we often run into some disagreement, some confusion about what the term is intended to mean. And so one of the reasons that we were pleased to have this opportunity to talk today is to continue to bring this idea up. I mean, Nina's been talking about it with using these words for over 5 years now. And we continue to face people who say, well, if you're just saying that it's okay to stutter, then what do we do in therapy? Why do we even do therapy? Or is there a role for the clinician? And what we want to highlight is that our goal in highlighting this concept and in highlighting this particular phrase is that we want to create an environment and a world where people are accepted for who they are, however they are. One does not have to achieve a certain level of fluency or use a certain technique or anything of the sort in order to have their speech be viewed as valid. When we talk about stuttering, we're not talking about acceptable stuttering or easier stuttering as being the only way to stutter. We're talking about however a person happens to stutter. And sometimes we run into the feedback that people say, oh, yes, but people want their fluency. There are people who clearly want to be able to speak more fluently. And we're not saying that that's a problem. We're not saying that people shouldn't want that if that's what they want. But we are saying that that is also an example of verbal diversity. Stuttered speech, controlled speech for those who want it, smoother speech for those who want it, sure. But we don't want to have one group within that broad tapestry putting their ideas on another group to say this is the way that you should have to speak. Acceptance doesn't mean that one is giving up on being different. Acceptance means that one is okay with oneself along the way toward a journey. And before our talk, I was over in Anita Blom's presentation, which was just fantastic. Thank you, Anita. I don't know if you're on the line with us. You may still be in that other room. But talking about the fact, oh, there you are. Hi there, Anita. Thanks. And thank you for your talk. Talking about the fact that we don't need to be specifying how other people talk. Other people get to talk their way. And that is all part of the broad range of diversity that we want to not just accept, because accept to me sometimes has that element of tolerate to it. That's not what this is about. This is about embracing everybody for who they are and how they are, and knowing that what they say is valuable and worthy of being said, even if it sounds different from the way that you might have said it or you might have wanted them to say it.
I paid for this seat. I paid for the seat. No.
Nina, I'll switch back over to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this one was yours, but we're going to go.
Oh, no. It's mine. It's green.
It's green, Scott.
It's green. We have this color coding that we do. Nina is the kind of reddish color and I'm the kind of greenish color. And I was just tossing back and forth. So why do we say it? And why do we make such a big deal about it? Well, sadly, as you all know all too well, we live in a society that doesn't understand stuttering. We live in a society that is so focused on fluency and so focused on superficial aspects of communication that people forget to listen to the message, to listen to the meaning. This doesn't only affect people who stutter. This affects people who have a wide range of differences in the way they speak. And we would like to see a world in which every variation can be embraced because that's part of the human condition. However, Anita pointed out in her presentation, if stuttering is 1%, if people who stutter comprise 1% of the population, and probably more based on the work that Stamma has done and that Eineke has done and others, because we know that many people are hiding their stuttering, so we don't get a good picture of how many people who stutter are out there. If this is such a common variation of the human experience, then it seems to us to be completely inappropriate to try to deny the experiences and realities of such a large percentage of the world population. Yet that is what my profession of speech language pathology has done. In fact, it's in the name, speech language pathology. I don't like to propagate this idea of pathologizing people who are different. I understand why our professional association has chosen that name. I don't have to agree with it, but I just tend to refer to myself as a therapist or a clinician because I'm helping people live their lives in the way they want to live them. But we talk about verbal diversity with clinicians, with speech language pathologists. Nina and I frequently do do presentations for speech language therapists all around the world, and particularly in the US. And we find that again and again and again, practicing clinicians have struggled with this idea of how to do therapy for their students who stutter without giving them the message that they're doing something wrong or something bad when they stutter. And so we want to continue to promote this idea in a specific attempt to change the way people are thinking about stuttering. Now this one is yours, Nina, because look, the text is red.
Thank you, Scott. So let's talk about how this phrase has been received. And it's really wonderful because the response has been amazing. Mostly because verbal diversity aligns with the broader concepts of neurodiversity and affirming that differences do not give people reasons to marginalize others. So we've been using this in our own therapy by discussing the ideals and having students use the phrase as a catalyst to try to destigmatize their own thoughts and feelings about stuttering. And we have even developed it further and included it in one of our activity resources for SLPs. It's resonated with speech professionals by providing them that context of a paradigm shift from fixing stuttering to more stutter affirming practices. And this is not something that's going to occur overnight. Just because the speech professionals that have written to us are so excited about verbal diversity doesn't mean they know how to bring it into therapy in specific ways. And of course, we continue to try to provide that information in a variety of ways. It's wonderful that SLPs have been sending us their success stories about discussing it in therapy, and it's really quite lovely that they are able to take this phrase, use it in a team meeting at school, and watch people's faces as they try to process the information and maybe shift their perspectives that may be based on fear for their child or their student, and shift the perspective to the idea that the loved one in their environment has a difference in speaking and not something that needs to be fixed. But most importantly, in the broader context, many people in the stuttering community have embraced this phrase and continue to spread the word about stutter affirming environments. Scott?
So we're fortunate here today to be talking to a group of folks who are understanding this idea and are resonating with this idea. And we're reveling in that. I appreciate the comments in the chat and the discussion that we're having over there. That is not the world that we function in on a day-to-day basis, sadly, when one is engaging in a movement building moment, as we're all trying to do together. We need to be talking to the people who don't get it. And I want to share with you just some of what I've learned about trying to communicate this message to others, being a speech language therapist who does not stutter myself, okay, and how I try to explain this to other clinicians and other researchers in particular, because as came up yesterday, I'm afraid I wasn't able to attend the meeting yesterday, but I've talked to a bunch of my friends who were able to attend yesterday's meeting. There is still a significant focus on fluency in many approaches to stuttering therapy, even despite the fact that, as Nina says, this idea has been decades in the making, even despite the fact that many people have been talking about stuttering pride and about coming to terms with stuttering in a different way and accepting it in a different way. And we still face a significant fluency focus amongst clinicians and in particular amongst researchers. And one of the pieces of the puzzle that I've come to learn that I need to explain more carefully myself when I'm talking about this topic is the use of the word acceptance. People don't get what acceptance means. Now, sometimes when I'm feeling grumpy, and it does happen from time to time, I think that they are willfully refusing to understand what acceptance means. by saying, oh, well, acceptance according to the dictionary means that I have to give up on trying to change. And that's not what we're talking about. You may all recall a certain letter to the editor exchange that occurred in one of our ASHA journals a long while back, where somebody accused those of us focusing on acceptance and stuttering therapy as giving up on people who stutter, as throwing in the towel on their future. And of course, that is not what we mean also. What we mean when we talk about acceptance is the ability for people to feel good about who they are and how they are. That doesn't mean that they might not want to change. That doesn't mean that they might not want to adapt or learn new skills or learn new ways of coping with the world. I'll take a completely unrelated speech example. I myself am right now working on how to find a better balance between the work that I so love to do and the life that I also need to be able to lead. Nina's laughing because my health is often an issue that we talk about because I work too darn hard, but I love it, right? So how do I find a balance between that? Well, I can do that by saying, oh, I shouldn't be working this hard. It's bad for me. It's bad for my wife. It's bad for my business partners and my friend. It's terrible. And that would be one potential motivator, but it's not a good one. Guilt and shame are not good motivators to change. I could also maybe approach this by saying, this is who I am at present. And yes, there are things I'd like to change, but I recognize that being who I am has helped me get to where I am. And I'm grateful for where I am, and I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've got. And even in that context, I can look at how can I live my life in an even better way? How can I live out my values? I see the need to put ACT in there. Yes, indeed, we use a lot of ACT in our therapy. How can I live out my values? How can I be the person I want to be in a value-driven life, and not be upset at myself along the way? Acceptance means that you can still work toward change without having to hate yourself along the journey. And if we could help researchers, and if we could help many clinicians understand that, then it might be easier for them to give their clients and their children in particular the message that they're okay along the way. Yoshi, great question. I'm going to turn it over to Nina, but I'll tap in some thoughts along the way because Nina's got some thoughts for the future.
So we're really just excited and very encouraged that this concept can be used for the good it can do to change the mindsets, to change the narrative, and move that needle toward neurodiversity affirming environments for people who stutter. So we're hoping that if you're a speech professional, you can try it out with your students and their caregivers. If you're a person who stutters, you can reflect on it for your own value and also share it with others who stutter. If you're an employee or an employer, discuss it and create environments of acceptance in the workplace. And if you're a leader in the stuttering community, dialogue about it. Have some fun watching the positive outcomes in support meetings and beyond. We have future plans to sponsor a verbal diversity initiative. We're going to try to invite all the voices, people who stutter, caregivers, allies, support organizations, speech professionals, to share their stories of change. We do realize that verbal diversity, much to your, Yoshi, to your point, verbal diversity is just one phrase, concept in the sea of ideas that really resonate with different people around the world and in different parts of the stuttering community. It's there to help create healthy discussions around stuttering in our homes, in our schools, in our workplaces, and eventually, we hope, in society. The true excitement for us about verbal diversity is that it can be in sort of an ever-evolving catalyst for shared experiences and hopefully social change.